Last week we looked at a game which mostly encouraged you to run in the shadows. This week we've looked at a game that inspired me to just plain old run. So, let's go for it. Perhaps not the most upbeat note to start this video on, but a reasonably representative example of the response that Mirror's Edge Catalyst elicited from games critics and players alike. Hell, it's even a reasonably representative example of my own response to Mirror's Edge Catalyst, at least in the first hour of play. The thing is, the original Mirror's Edge was a flawed gem, and when Catalyst promised changes, it was hoped we'd see those flaws ironed out. However, the changes made to the general framework of the game are a mixed bag. The game has implemented a uniquely unreactive open world. Once it's opened up, it's a wonderful landscape to explore the rooftops of, but in its initial, confined moments, it's an incredibly limited space to move around in, and these sections of the open world set in buildings and at street level just don't hold up to scrutiny. The sterility that works so brilliantly when you've a bird's eye view of the ultra-clean dystopian city falls down when you're wandering through alleyways and wondering at the complete lack of life. Despite mixing up the story a bit for this reboot, it remains incredibly predictable, now filled with even more miserable characters. This is coupled with a gloomy variant of the original's extended tutorial of an intro, which manages to feel all the more tedious for its brooding moodiness. The pointless ability to shoot has happily been removed, but in its place enforced melee combat sections added. Shootouts have been made more bearable by the fact that you can now absorb damage by building momentum, i.e. continually moving, but this also means that the combat has become unsatisfyingly easy. Just run in circles, occasionally attacking the enemy, and you'll see your way through every encounter. On top of that, the implementation of the open world means we no longer have Mirror's Edge's beautiful combination of a linear story-based campaign coupled with a series of discrete time trials set across various abstract landscapes. But on the other hand, the open world itself is dotted with little side missions. Courier runs, time trials, even puzzle-based missions that see you working out how to scale areas to hack billboards or sneak through complex defense-filled installations known as grid nodes. So you're never wanting for extra content. And on top of that, the game keeps track of every mission you complete, main and side, and allows you to replay them whenever you wish, which is quite frankly a masterstroke, a feature I wish every open world game had. Still, of all the changes made, there's one which is unambiguously bad, and it's one which primarily affects your enjoyment at the start of the game, to the point that I very nearly gave up on it. That change? Locking core abilities behind an XP-based progression structure, meaning you can't, say, quick turn when you start the game, nor raise your legs to pass over low objects unhindered, nor skill roll to maintain your momentum when falling large distances. It's a genuinely bewildering change to the design. One of the joys of Mirror's Edge is mastering a complex, precise moveset, gradually increasing your own abilities. Having to level up your character in order to access that moveset is a downright terrible design decision. Couple that with the fact that you can end up with access to side quests that are literally uncompletable due to lacking the requisite skills, but the game won't tell you that, and you've just got a recipe for disaster. So you're probably asking around now, what the hell is this game doing here? I thought this was games you should play, not disappointing sequels you should avoid. Well, that's the thing. For all its flaws, for all that it stumbles, and by God does it stumble, Mirror's Edge Catalyst is, well, it's just wonderful. In the most literal sense, it is a game with the power to evoke wonder, through its perfect controls, through its exhilarating sense of movement, through its incredible art style backed up by the most dreamlike soundtrack. With all its imperfections, it is the most perfect, imperfect game I have ever played. Everything that it does right, it does so to an unparalleled degree. Let's take those controls first. Mirror's Edge is hardly the only parkour-inspired game series around, of course, but it takes the road less travelled in its approach. The most popular approach is that used by Assassin's Creed, aiming to make games that encourage free-flowing movement through smooth automation and anticipation of player intent. Mirror's Edge, by contrast, aims for controls so precise that the player can achieve free-flowing motion through mastery and skill alone. In so doing, Mirror's Edge becomes a game where movement is always involving, where keeping up the pace requires you to achieve the same frame of mind as an intense racing game, always aware of your surroundings, always anticipating your next move. It's the polar opposite of Assassin's Creed's hands-off experience, where you always feel like you're watching a character follow instructions rather than carrying out any actions yourself. This feeds into the game's immersion. The precise controls, combined with the first-person perspective, ensure that you really feel like you're there, that you're the one racing across the rooftops. You're the one scaling incredible heights, making death-defying leaps of faith. Combine that immersion with the game's sense of motion and you get an utterly exhilarating experience, and one which is only heightened by the brilliant sound design throughout. Even ignoring the music, the sounds of motion, the squeak of your shoes, the rush of wind in your ears, the guttural sound of Faith's, of your breath, and the gradual softening, fading of all ambient noises as you gain momentum, get into the zone. They all do an incredible job of communicating the rush and excitement of running free. I mean, just listen to it. There is, for my money, no game which can match Mirror's Edge Catalyst for conveying the sheer thrill of motion. Even brilliant, exhilarating games like F-Zero GX, like Powerdrome, like Ballistics, for all their speed, for all their emphasis on quick reactions, none of them move me with their motion the same way Mirror's Edge Catalyst can. In fact, if there's one area where Catalyst unequivocally usurps its predecessor, it's in this. And that isn't to say that the original Mirror's Edge didn't do an incredible job in the first place, it's just that Catalyst takes it to new heights. And that brings us onto something that both Mirror's Edge and, well, the classic Sonic games of all things, share, which is a widespread criticism that they are great games in motion, but a bit of a damp squib when the player slows down. And, like those Sonic games of old, this criticism is wildly misplaced. The game is incredible in motion, no doubt about it, but it remains hugely compelling in its more measured moments too. This is helped, no doubt, by the fact that this is a visual tour de force. Not through technical brute force, though obviously the Frostbite engine isn't to be sniffed at, but through sublime design. The colour-coded regions of the game are all variations on a theme of astonishing, with the architecture and vistas to discover breathtaking at moments. When traversing the world I often choose to stop and take in my surroundings, and it's always worth it. So when the game chooses to slow the pace, to provide you with a section where you have to explore, to think, you're almost always being presented with the opportunity to absorb some beautiful sights. More than this, some of the most enjoyable gameplay in Catalyst comes from its more puzzly sections. Trying to figure out just how you're going to get higher up a skyscraper that's under construction, working out what series of acrobatics will allow you to break through the defences of a grid node without setting off the alarms. As both platformer and puzzle platformer, Mirror's Edge Catalyst is a triumph, and the first-person perspective gives it a flavour unlike any other, with the exception of its immediate predecessor, of course. I can't stress just how much the first-person perspective does for this game, not just in terms of sense of motion, as already covered, but in terms of the sense of figuring out how to navigate the world. Where third-person platformers tend to lay everything out for you, have puzzles based on manipulating the world or limit themselves to pure reactions and pixel-perfect jumping, Mirror's Edge is free to use your limited perspective as part of its challenge. It encourages you to look around and explore in order to understand your environment, understand how you can subvert it to your needs. It's just a perfect match, and the fact that the only other game to run with the style is the even worse plotted zombie survival horror Dying Light is a crying shame. Oh, and before I forget, there is one other element that absolutely needs to be talked about, because it is second to none. The soundtrack by Solar Fields is just perfect, accompanying your moments of pause with ambient reflection that tugs at the soul, and your more frantic moments with pounding excitement, all the while matching the game's future sterile aesthetic to a T. In an era where many game soundtracks just feel like variations on a theme, Mirror's Edge Catalyst's music is immediately identifiable and a perfect fit for the game. If it seems as though I've spent a lot of time on the aesthetic merits of the game, that's because they matter. The audio-visual experience in Mirror's Edge complements the overall experience in a way few games manage. It offers an almost synesthetic experience, with the game's sound and video reflecting the feel of the gameplay, the elements coming together and enhancing one another perfectly. In this respect, it reminds me of nothing so much as the ever-brilliant Rez, even though on the surface an abstract on-rails shooter with a heavy techno soundtrack might not seem that similar to a first-person platform with a near-future setting. I can think of no other games that so masterfully intertwine sound, visuals and mechanics. In its core qualities, I can see Catalyst as nothing other than a refinement of everything that made the original Mirror's Edge great. It does have its flaws, but they can mostly be overlooked. The locked movement abilities that so irritate at the start can be unlocked within a couple of hours. The static open world is easy to forgive when its rooftops are so inviting, the collectible orbs dotting land incredibly satisfying to find, making the endgame feel like a more focused crackdown. Despite its issues, Mirror's Edge Catalyst is a breathtaking game to play through. It has some structural issues, but its core mechanics are tuned to perfection and accompanied by the most brilliantly well-suited audio-visual experience. Rebooting the flawed gem that was Mirror's Edge resulted in yet another flawed gem, but like the original, look past its failings and you will find one of the most beautiful, thrilling games around. It might not stick the landing, but in its best moments Mirror's Edge Catalyst is spectacular, an unmissable entry in the all-too-slight genre of first-person platformers.
Jan cannot do the closing video this week as he is indisposed. So on his behalf, thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking the video and maybe subscribing to his channel. I think it would really cheer him up in his hour of need. And if you really like the video, why not tell your friends about it so they can enjoy it too. Thank you, bye!